to our 5 o'clock board study session tonight. And I'm glad you could come to it. We'll get started real quick with some USB updates by Janice Christensen, please.
My first update would be to remind everyone to please go on to usba.cc, sign on for the training, and then select the year that you want to participate. And make sure, a comment was made to me tonight that they're signing on to this, but they're not getting credit for what they've done. So please, if you have any snag that way, please let me know, because there are ways, it must be in the system.
How do we know what year we're supposed to do?
Have you start at 1.
Okay, so just start over,
start
even
at
if
1.
we're like, okay.
Yep.
Do we only have to do 1 year? We have to do all of them?
No, you only have to do 1 year, but if you want to be stellar.
I'm all about these, so
It doesn't pay.
I can't get extra gold star.
The JLC, the Joint Legislative Committee, which is the board members, superintendents, and business administrators, have come up with the joint legislative priorities for 2026. And I'll just comment the ones on the ones that are highlighted, but you can find out more about it. One is to get an education working group that's with the legislators and with the JLC, so that they come up with solutions to support students, educators, parents, families. Provide a 2% above the guaranteed inflation and growth in the WPU for all students, and prioritizing special education students. Fulfill a prior commitment, that don't want them to forget that they have committed to increase new funding for at-risk students to better provide resources for their needs. I love this one. Help us create a reliable future workforce by providing resources to incentivize a culture of student attendance. And I know our district has been working on that, how to incentivize a culture of student attendance. Since COVID, we all know student attendance has been drastically challenged. Also create a plan for economic stabilization account that allows 85% available funds to go directly to the LEAs. And last but not least, collaborate with the JLC on a long-term education funding framework. So these are their priorities for 26, and I think they're pretty valid. I had the opportunity to attend. We all were invited, but it's out of our area. It's like a 5-hour drive. And so I can understand why people are challenged attending it, but I want to say that the Leadership Academy in Bryce Canyon was well worth it. We had an opportunity to meet with the state superintendent, Utah's the school boards, the new superintendent, Molly Hart, and she presented to us a software that Gina said that we've been busy using, and she really highlighted it, datagateway.schools.utah.gov, and that we're using it to collect information, and it can come right down to schools, principals, individuals, to help us see how proficient they are and how they've progressed. And she laid it out for us, and it was an amazing tool. And the suggestion is that this be part of the certification for the school board, that they be mindful of this. Also, I handed out at our, let's see, yeah, that's it, thank you. I'll seal it in there. This best practice handbook, It was compiled by the Office of Legislative Auditor General, and it has analyzed and highlighted best practices to bring about student achievement. So that is excellent. Also, something very meaningful to me, and Superintendent Butters said is well into our way, and we'll hear about it tonight, is an examination of AI. And as the Utah Blueprint for System-Wide Implementation. Our presenter was the education specialist on USBE, Matthew Winters. And apparently Nick Harris has been working closely with him. I felt the comment was true. If we don't learn how to take advantage in a safe way of AI, then we'll have to learn to compete with it. And I thought, yeah, that's very valid. It's part of our world, that's it. And the thing they said are the two biggest mistakes that you make regarding AI is, first of all, you don't have a policy, and secondly, you think you are behind. And do not be thinking you are behind, because the technology is changing constantly. So jump in where we are and develop a safe policy. One of the last things that I attended, which I found very inspiring, it was called Highly Effective and Cohesive Boards. And they were very attentive and clever in presenting that a highly effective and cohesive board does not unanimously vote all the same, but has learned to be cohesive anyhow, and that we can all improve. And suggestions are like a professional retreat, and also something available. What I thought was excellent was, you know how we have the USBA facilitates a superintendent evaluation, a business administrator evaluation. We can, as school board members, have access to a school board member evaluation, and I certainly would like to have that for myself and for others. Anyhow, that was it, and I hope that in the future more of us will be able to attend something like Leadership Academy, because it was very eye-opening and educational. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Janice. The next item on the agenda is the Far West City's proposed project and CRA, Far West Landing. We have been meeting with Far West for quite a few months now. Last board meeting in September, we had Mayor Phippen and Doug Larson come in and do a presentation with us. Things just didn't come together very well on that. And so we have decided, the CRA committee and the superintendent has decided not to participate in that CRA. And that's just an informational thing, unless Bruce or Doug, that's other two committee members, if you'd like to say anything.
Well, I think it would be important to just, one of the major factors in that is that CRA proposal had a lot of high density housing, and we're really not in the business of subsidizing housing. And I think when we pinned them down and we found what the ownership of that would be and who that ownership would be, it would still be the developer, and that was something that's just not part of our CRA policy.
We have, I think all of you are familiar with the board's guiding principles that we have pertaining to CRAs. We've kind of worked through, superintendents worked real hard on this, and in your packets there is an update to that we'll not get it really into tonight, but in the future. Things have changed since years ago when we set those guiding principles on CRAs, and so we'd like to update those and perhaps even make them a policy for our district, where they've just been a guiding principle so far. Kelly, go ahead.
So is what you have here, this is what we currently have, not what we're thinking we need to update.
Right.
So we're looking maybe towards putting that into board policy.
Yeah.
I think that would be good, just because it gives, we have lots of questions at Truth and Taxation on our CRA policy, and then that makes it transparent to the public as well.
Yeah. When those were originally put into place, they were guiding principles to help us. But as things have changed in the world, I think it may be best, to do that. So that's just a consideration.
Just a comment about that, you've heard the term mission creep. Originally, the CRAs were to help bring new industry businesses from out of state, big kinds of things to help. They wouldn't come otherwise. We wanted to participate, but now it seems like every little project that they would have to probably do anyway, they're looking for help, and it's just, doesn't seem fair.
Every time somebody digs a hole, they want to enter a CRA.
Yeah, when we build a school, we don't ask the other communities to subsidize us.
Correct. Any other questions, comments on that? There will be more on, there's a couple more of these coming down towards us, and we'll try and keep everybody informed as they go along. Superintendent?
Yeah, I asked Brock if you're okay, board, as part of that informational packet that you have, he's also provided you an update of all of the CRA participation that we are involved in. And Brock, is there anything you want to say, speak to that? He did a really nice job compiling all of that information.
So I went back on the county site, and I could go back as far as 2017 and find all the year-end information. So I consolidated all that for all of our current agreements, and that's on that sheet. It shows where these agreements end, our participation, the base value at the time of the creation, and then the total collection if we hadn't joined the agreement versus what the collections are with the agreements, and then the splits between the project itself and then what came to the Weaver School District. The important thing to remember is we still gain what we would have gained had no project been going on, and then we also get the marginal difference of the percent that we're part of that. And so that's what this this sheet is. It shows all that amount, and then the second sheet is just the last 2 years. So you can see the breakdown of what we've collected versus what the different entities have collected that we've got the partnerships with. So I've got those, again, go back to 2017 as far as I could go back, and I can answer any deeper questions. We can sit down and look at the full spreadsheets if you have any further questions on that.
Thank you. Okay. Brock, go ahead on that finance training, please.
Okay. So in your packets, you should have a couple of sheets that look somewhat like this. This is the snapshot of it, but they're the minimum school program sheets. What superintendent had asked me to do is just to spend some time talking through what the state provides to us through our minimum school program. So I want to talk through those sheets. In there, there's also a breakdown and description of each of these line items, so you can get a better understanding of where this funding comes from and kind of what that funding can be used for. So I'm going to go through just 5 quick slides that just have snapshots of each of these, and I'll describe them as we go. But at any point in time, I'm happy to sit with either you guys as a small group or individually and talk through any information on these sheets. So looking at this first slide I've got up, it's going to kind of show a side-by-side of the 2 sheets that you have in front of you. It's just the comparisons of what's called the final update and then the legislative updates. And so you'll see the blue highlights on your sheets, where it's the final and the legislative updates. The final updates come out in July, and so that's the previous fiscal year. The legislative updates come out in April. So obviously there's some overlap in these, because they want us to be able to use those legislative updates to prepare our budgets for the upcoming year. On those 2 sheets, you'll see the value of the WPU by April, that WPU value set. So you can see fiscal year 25s versus fiscal year 26s. Those are highlighted in blue. The thing that's highlighted in pink is the state basic levy. So that's the one that is levied on our county by the state. That's the levy the board does not have control of. So those are the amounts that will be brought in from that. Now, on the legislative estimate, obviously, we don't know what that levy is yet. You can see circled in purple there, it was 0.001463. That's what the state believed it would be when this was put together. But after all of the assessed values have come in at the state level, that was reduced down to 0.001379. So those things are going to shift, even though this estimate comes out. It shifts in reality when tax rates are set. So because of that difference, that 34.9 million actually is going to be 33.5 million coming to Weaver School District. The other thing in pink there, those are the voted board levies as of April, and so that's the previous year. Again, obviously, we adjusted those in the truth and taxation. So again, those are just estimates. And so this is kind of that upper area of the two notices. Okay, so I wanted to point that out because there's a lot of good information that helps us at least start our budgeting process. Next slide. David, this is not working for me. You might move to that. Thank you. Halfway now through this page, just wanted to point out a couple things. This is where the basic school programs are listed. So again, you got fiscal year 25, fiscal year 26. Highlighted there in the blue square is the student count. That's grades K through 12. And so this is our average daily membership. And so that's the entire district, all students. And these are the programs that are driven by the WPU value. So everything in that blue square down, those are WPU values that give us that total amount. So that 45,909 for fiscal year 25 and the 42,193 for fiscal year 26 represents the WPUs. So you take that number times the WPU value, and that's where that money amount comes from to the district. Now, each of those lines are calculated based on some formulas the state has, with the exception of that grades K through 12. That is just student ADM. The one big difference that you'll notice there in 25 versus 26 is that professional staff that was highlighted in the blue. That professional staff is not on fiscal year 26. That's a legislative change. It dropped it down into the flexible allocation. And I'll talk about that in just a second. Now, the thing to note is that pink highlighted matches the state levy amount from the last slide. What the state does is they take our WPU times the ADM, and then they subtract out the amount that they have us levy to our community. So where they're having us levy that, it still is coming out of the WPU. So it skews that number just slightly. So this is all WPU driven funding above there. Now, sometimes you'll hear the phrase above the line, below the line. That right there is the line. So when they separate that out, they're talking where do the WPUs drive things versus where do the non-WPUs drive things, okay? So everything above that line is increased year over year as the WPU goes up. Anything below that line is not. You have to think there's a whole pot at the state level for each of those programs, and then it's just proportionally given out to the districts based on any number of factors. A couple of things there, you'll notice flexible allocation is in blue. That's where fiscal year 25's professional staff has landed. So if you compare flexible allocation from 25 to 26, it jumped from like 18,000, if I remember correctly, to 12.7 million because professional staff has dropped it. The problem is professional staff will not grow with the WPU anymore. And that is where a lot of our educators who have more experience are paid. And so that does create some payroll concerns. Everything in yellow there is something that as a district we have to apply for. And so they don't have numbers and values associated with those. We have different sectors at the district level that have to put in grant requests. By the time the mid-year or final year obviously comes in, we'll know what those amounts are. We have a pretty good understanding and an idea of what those are, but we don't actually get those amounts until after those requests are done. And so everything there, like I said, the descriptions are in those packets. I kind of shrunk that down to about a 3-page Cliff Notes version. On the state side, there's a 12-page version, and I would be happy to send it to you so you have a little more information if you want, or we can just talk through it. Right? And then last page, this shows the voted and board. So same idea when we talked about the tax increments and where that breakdown is in the state guaranteed funding. That's what this part is. What's in green is what's levied within our county. The difference on the far right is what the state guarantees on their end of things. And if you remember our conversations from 25-26, they are going to guarantee that same amount before that starts to decrease 33% each year over the next 3 years. But that in the green is what we will bring in as a Weber County, and then on the right side is what the state will match us. And the last thing on that fiscal year 26, there was some legislative changes on fees, and they ended quite a few fees. So you'll see that school fees amendments, that bottom right one, it's the light green. We got $919,202 this year to give out to our schools to cover the loss of those fees. We'll give, so that's 50% of our overall total. We'll get another 30% next year, and then the final 20% the year after to grade our whole 100%. We kind of did some math, and we took 50% of this allocation to give out this year. We'll use the other 50% next year, and then the 30% and the 20% to try and stretch this out as long as we possibly can.
And then it'll be phased to zero?
And then it's phased to zero.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is the minimum school program in a very, very quick snapshot. But like I said, I'm happy to answer any questions as you guys would like to. But this is where a majority, as you can see, for this year, $248.6 million will come to us from the state.
I have two questions. So this, when we talked, this is your 12th page. Is this what you're talking about?
That's
Okay.
the one I shrunk down, yeah.
And then my second question is, so I've heard that there's a legislative subcommittee going on right now that would eliminate funding for our CTSOs.
That was eliminated last legislative session.
It was, so we
It
have,
was.
so that, but that's a below the line. Well, it was compromising our ability to have CTSOs, so can we speak to that? Is that?
Yeah, and Rod, please feel free to jump in here too. We're of course are gonna stay committed. They're such important student organizations in our district that support student growth. And Rod, do you wanna speak a little bit to how you're adjusting to that?
Well, there are two things going on. We did have the funding removed from CTSOs last year. There was the carve-out funding. But what Kelly's referring to right now is a new development that just came about yesterday, and that's the state pays individuals to run like DECA, FBLA, FFA. There's a person that helps facilitate those, and that same legislative committee is talking about possibly eliminating those positions. So that's, I don't know if you've heard that, but that was just.
Yeah, I just saw that today.
Yeah, so that's something that we'll adjust to, but the larger picture of this is we've never had more kids involved in CTSOs this year. It's still going. We appreciate our teachers working with students, and this is really value added to our CTE programs and great things for kids. So we'll continue to work with Brock on that.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks, Brock. No further questions, comments for Brock? Superintendent.
Appreciate Brock. I've asked him every, maybe couple of board meetings, just to provide a little snippet of financial operations and budget training. I think it's really valuable, so thanks so much. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time because I know we've got a couple of things to get through. So on your agenda, right at the back, board, I provided you a long list of the amazing things that have been going on in our district just the first month of school in September. And I just want to highlight a couple if I could publicly, because I was so touched by each of these events for one reason or another. First of all, yesterday, our curriculum and instruction department had really done a nice job, I felt like, of trying to promote the live stream reading of the Constitution that took place yesterday, especially in our history classes across the district. And I have not had a chance, since it just was so recent, to find out how that played out. But we really tried hard to make sure that we embrace the patriotic theme of September and tried to get that information out to our teachers and to our students. Another event that took place regarding 9/11 and Constitution Month and all of these things that we celebrate in September happened at Weaver Innovation High School. it's showcased on our social feeds right now, and so I'd really encourage you to go take a look. But Principal Nikki Slaw had her students and staff, along with Two Rivers student and staff, they paid tribute to the heroes of 9/11. And what I thought was so unique is kids got dressed up in first responder gear, and they climbed 2,200 steps at the school. They went up and down the stairway there at Weber Innovation High School, which is equivalent to the 110 flights of stairs at the World Trade Center. And I was able to talk to a few kids as I've been over there visiting at the school here and there, and they were really, really impacted by that activity. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Weber Innovation. And then at Bates Elementary, you all recall, you're all aware, we saw it on the hillside, no matter where we live in the county, that there was the recent Foothill Fire in the North Ogden area. And Bates Elementary and the North Ogden community came together and held a First Responders Appreciation Night to just thank the community and thank the first responders that kept them and their homes safe. And there were community leaders there. There was food trucks, and first responders and their families were fed and heard words of appreciation. So I thought that was a lovely event to highlight. Couple of other ones. I stood on the sideline over at Bonneville High School on Thursday last week and had to hold back some tears. I had a lump in my throat for a couple of hours as we watched our students with disabilities compete in the Unified Soccer tournament that took place there. Rich Murray had a Olympic-style venue laid out at Bonneville High School. If you haven't had a chance to come to one of our unified sports events, please do. He had petting zoo going on. It's going to be tough to top, but it was just so special to watch those kids competing and to watch all of the support staff around them cheering for them. I know that they felt very special. The major was flown before the event began, and we appreciate Jenny Taylor. And I just want to give a shout out to our special ed department and our foundation who sponsor those events every year and do such a nice job honoring our kids. So those would be the three that I wanted to point out tonight. But there, like you said, like I said, there's 2 pages. So take a look. Just scroll down through that. That's in 1 month's time for all of those great things going on in our district. Thank you.
Thanks, Superintendent. Let's move on to some department presentations. Start off with the Catalyst Center. Dr. Belknap, please.
Board, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Catalyst. The Catalyst is a House Bill 447, and it's monies that have been allocated. It's in a competitive grant situation. So we're going to talk a little bit about a timeline today. And districts are able to apply for this money. Now, we do have $5 million to start with from IHC, and we've talked about that previously. But this will be an explanation really of what the Catalyst Center grant is all about. The Catalyst Center grant it's designed to replicate professional environments. In other words, having students be able to have actual authentic experiences learning with industry partners with local industry, businesses, and community organizations for student projects. So for example, a student would create a web page for a local city or for a small business or something like that. They would work not only acquiring skills, but they would work hand in hand with industry partners, aligned with high skill, high demand career pathways. We'll talk about some of those pathways here in just a few minutes. And then uses industry standard tools, technology, and methods. This is an opportunity for us to kind of connect with industry and be able to replicate the kinds of work environments that they would have in actual industry positions. Student activities and projects that would build durable skills. In other words, these are employability skills.
facilitates mentorship from industry professionals, and it includes an advisory board that's part of this. Lastly, it addresses gaps in the workforce. So what we're really looking at with this grant is there are different types of grants that qualify under this 447. One is that you can enhance CTE offerings that are currently happening. You can expand a Catalyst Center if you already have some sort of a center like that. There are 3 or 4 districts that do. And then finally, you can create a Catalyst Center. And that's ideally what we'd like to do, board, is to look at an application to be able to create our own Catalyst Center. The Catalyst Center is a term that's used over in Davis School District. That's called the Catalyst Center. We would be coming up with a name of our own. As part of Elevate 2028, it states preparing future-ready learners. And that's indeed what we are looking at doing here, is preparing students for the workplace and opportunities so that when they get there, they're able to be successful in high-demand, high-wage areas, and that would give them a leg up with students maybe from other districts or other places that are not doing making those connections. I stated there that we have the IHC grant, which is $5 million Head Start. The Catalyst grant is $65 million worth of money that's there. It'll be highly competitive. There will be a lot of districts that are trying for that money. As far as a timeline is concerned, I wanted to make the board aware of this, that the application itself will be available on October 15th. And then we will have, roughly 5-6 weeks to be able to complete the application, submit it on November 21st. And then within that month or so, they're saying that we will be notified whether or not we received funding for this. And then the money would be available on January 5th. There's some accountability that's attached to it, of course, but we are highly interested and want to submit an application for this process. Some of the areas that are in high demand, high wage areas or opportunities would be for sure around health sciences, audio visual. In fact, you'll note tonight some of our students helped with the videos that will be played during the board meeting. These are the types of projects that we would like students to be involved with. Computer science, cyber, and I know we're going to talk more about AI later this evening. And then possible a culinary option there, a cafe of sorts, engineering, aviation, aerospace, drones, entrepreneurship and business, construction. Some of these are just extensions from current successful programs that we have out there, but others are really designed to connect more intimately with industry and to do projects that aren't just about taking a class and learning skills, rather actually applying those skills and working with industry partners. And ultimately, even in cases where students, it doesn't accelerate them into their desired career, what they do gain are these durable skills: collaboration, problem solving, adaptability and innovation, teamwork, communication, leadership. All of these skills are the skills that we know students need in order to be successful in the workplace. And these are the things that we'll double down on and ensure that every student that comes through this program acquires these skills. So it's a great opportunity. We're really looking forward to the application process. Board, what questions and discussion do you have?
So this grant is a one-time payout, or is it ongoing?
It's ongoing. I mean, each
You have to apply for it.
you would apply each year. Yeah, but it's $65 million each year for the foreseeable future.
No, I just wanted to give a shout out to our CTE people who are already working on this in terms of our course offerings. So I was able to sit in on an advisory board panel last week with Kyle Stanger and Rod, and is it Trevor Ward?
Mm-hmm.
With Trevor Ward talking about our health science offerings. And I just think, I love this Catalyst Center. model. And I think our district is doing a really good job at being proactive in coming up with the correct offerings and that are industry friendly and working with industry partners. So I just wanted to give a shout out to your department and for those people who are working on those advisory boards to move us in this right direction.
Thanks, Kelly, appreciate that. Yep, we've had, and I want everyone on the board to know, we've had a number of meetings, not only with industry partners, but also with the ATC, with OTEC and with Weber State, to make sure that those offerings are not competing with them, rather supporting them.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you to kind of explain to everyone how those all blend together instead of fighting against each other. They're all blending together to help the students.
Yeah, 2 or 3 of the programs, I'll give you an idea, like right now we're teaching real estate. That'll be a class that we would offer there. Last year we had 9 students complete the majority of their hours toward their real estate licenses at age 18 and finished it up during the summer. So those are the kinds of programs that we would partner with OTEC to be able to teach those kinds of things that move students ahead. I mean, can you imagine that? At 18 years old, you have your real estate license. And that's what that partnership does. And we'll do the same thing in some of the manufacturing areas and cyber.
Rod, have you got any estimates on what it's gonna take to be able to put this Catalyst Center together as of yet?
Gina, do you want to speak to that, or Larry?
Larry's gonna be talking here in just a little bit, in relation to that, but we're gonna go for at least a $15 million ask on our grant application. And we feel like in talking to the creators of the House bill, Speaker Schultz and Senator Milner, that is not too much to ask. So we're hoping to pair that amount of money with the $5 million grant that we've received, hoping that that'll cover the bill.
Great. Other questions or discussion? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Rob. Moving on, Larry Hadley, please, talking about Catalyst Center Exploratory Committee.
Board Superintendent Butters, thank you for the opportunity tonight to briefly talk to you. In your consent calendar, just a quick reminder and a brief explanation that in working with Rod and the superintendent, what we decided to do is to follow our RFP process to select an architect and a contractor to be part of the exploratory committee, that if we do go to the bubble of creating a Catalyst Center, they could help us in design from the get-go. Because you really want to design this Catalyst Center around the curriculum areas you select. So we have put this exploratory committee together, and we put this in your consent calendar, that the selection committee selected BCBO as the architect and Hogan Construction as the contractor. So with your approval on the consent calendar, we will set up a meeting to start design hand in hand with Dr. Belknap. He's actually sat on those committees with us to select, and we will start putting some exploratory ideas of curriculum areas and how we design this. But we won't get ahead of the grant and or the board. When that kind of finalizes, I'll come back to the board to show you what we'd like to build. Any questions? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Larry. Appreciate it. Legal Services, Heidi Alder, please.
Good evening, board. We have a number of policies on the consent calendar for repeal, and I want to start there real quick just to explain why we're repealing so many policies. In your memo, you can see there are quite a few. As we go through our policy book, we review each article one at a time and sit with the director over that policy book on that particular article and determine whether or not that's a policy that we've ever used, determine whether it's a policy that still is applicable in practice, and if not, then we have repealed it. There are a number of policies in Article 2, which is our facilities article, that haven't been relied upon. Many of them are 1 sentence or 2 sentences, and many of the policies are incorporated into other policies anyway. And so those are the reasons that those policies are being repealed. Policy 1100 is another policy on the consent calendar that's not being repealed, but just has some statutory updates that don't require any discretionary action on the part of the board. any questions about the consent calendar items? Okay, and I'll go through, we have two policies that the board approved on first reading last month. Policy 4200, school fee and fee waiver, and we did not make any changes to the policy. There was no feedback since the last read. If you recall, this policy was revised to incorporate updates by the legislature in 2025. And one of the changes that we made, and the reason we were bringing it to the board, because many of the changes are just statutory, but we did include a fine for the disposal of hazardous waste. A fine is distinguishable from a fee. Fees we have to notice in our fee schedule, but we wanted to include in this policy that there will be a fine for the disposal of hazardous waste like an e-cigarette, for example. When an administrator confiscates an e-cig over so many times, then we can fine a student for that confiscation.
I had one question on this one, so I didn't look at before. Under the class change fee, for the $10, it talks about needing signatures of students, teachers, parents, and counselors, and I know we've moved that to a Google form. Does that still have areas on there for parent signature for the class change?
On the Google form?
Yeah.
I will defer to.
Okay. I just think if we have that on there, I just want to make sure that that's consistent, because I know we used to write them on paper, but now it's all on Google form.
Heather, do you know that?
Okay, just so that if policy says we have to have student, parent, teacher, counselor.
Yeah, we can follow up with each school and make sure that their Google form is consistent with the policy. Thank you. Any other questions on that policy? The other policy on second read is our policy 4500, or extracurricular activities policy. We didn't have any feedback on that policy, and we just revised this policy to include that ninth graders who are participating in high school activities, 10 through 12, are not excused from their class if they have to go to the high school for a specific athletic class, and that we don't have athletic classes that are extracurricular classes during the school day unless there is a reason based on scheduling and timing throughout the year. So there are just a couple of designated extracurricular activities that also have the class, and that will minimize the number of ninth graders that have to leave. Any questions about that one? Okay, we have a number of new policies up on our first reading, and I'll go through these quickly because I will tell you that we do expect there to be changes between this presentation and the next month's presentation, as we've already received some feedback from stakeholders wanting to tweak some of the policies slightly. The first policy is the policy 2240, our rules governing the use of facilities. It needed some updates to include a provision for long-term rentals. Occasionally we will rent one of our facilities on a long-term basis, more than once or twice. And we wanted to include a provision about how to accommodate those organizations who want to rent our facilities on a long-term basis. And then we also updated our fee table. The Capital Improvements Committee periodically goes through and updates our fee table, and that is attached to this policy. There were some other changes that we made with regard to the various organizations and how we categorize our rentals, nonprofit, commercial, and then we included PTA sort of as a separate category. So there may be some changes, like I said, as the facilities department looks through it and has a couple of suggestions, but this is presented to the board on a first read. Are there any questions about this policy?
Yeah, I know we don't have policy meeting this week, or this month, right? No policy meeting. Okay, so I'll email you just a few things that I had, but my question, we don't have a definition section, are we gonna add that?
Oh, we should.
Yeah.
Yeah, we add that to your email.
Okay, yeah, I'll add that to my email. And then the other thing is on the last section, on section 9, under environmental center, it talks about under C, that if we don't discriminate in granting use of the environmental center. I think we need to add that to the full policy, that we don't discriminate, because I don't think we have that discrimination in use to our regular facilities. It's only there for environmental centers, so.
Great. Yes, thank you. Any other feedback or comments on that one? Okay, the next one is policy, sorry, I got these out of order. Policy 7250 is a new policy, and it's a policy that we probably should have had for a while, but we haven't. It governs employees who have private employment that services our students. So for example, the music teacher who also teaches piano lessons privately, or the football coach who also has a clinic that he runs privately. The State Board of Education has a specific rule that outlines the requirements for employees who engage in private but public education related activities, making sure that there's not a crossover, there's not a conflict of interest, that the employee isn't gathering team members from private capacity and not trying to build a private business through their role as a public employee. So much of this rule is just copy and paste from what the State Board of Education has in its rule. We do have a couple of additional components, including a requirement that all employees who have a separate private business do sign an acknowledgement form that basically is like a disclosure of a conflict of interest. And that will require significant training that we hope to implement either next semester or even next school year, depending on our capacity. That's the policy 7250. Any questions about that? Okay. The next two policies I'll present in tandem because they are our acceptable use policy. 8310 is our acceptable use policy for staff, and 8320 is our acceptable use policy for students. It's been years since we've updated our acceptable use policies, and we have updated some things on our websites, and sometimes we update an acceptable use policy for elementary schools, and we realized that we have about 4 or 5 acceptable use policies, and I put that in quotes because we're not really sure which is the actual policy out there. And so it was necessary to gather all of those forms that we have on our website, what's sent out to students, what we have in our actual policy board book, and combine those and then update those with current technology. So much of what is in here is a combination of what we already have and what we're doing with some updated provisions that we've been guided by our tech department. Any questions or comments on either of those?
Sorry, you know me, I have all the comments. On the student appropriate use, it talks about off-campus internet expression. Do we need to add, and so I realize that that's usually when there's a nexus to the school, if a student perceives a threat due to off-campus expression. Do we need to add anything for like extracurricular? You know, there's certain groups that have like a constitution that even if it's, anyways, I don't know if we need to add that. And then my other comment was under the disciplinary action that maybe we need to refer to our like bullying policy for people who have the off-campus internet expression violations, just to refer to or our discipline policy for that. Because that seems to be different than misusing devices on campus, right? If that makes sense.
That doesn't anymore.
Okay.
I think it's really important. We want to make sure we have it clear. What I would recommend is having just a provision about students' First Amendment rights and what they can and can't say even online when it comes to using student networks and student district networks and devices. Any other questions about either of those? Okay, thank you very much.
That concludes our study session for tonight. We'll go ahead and take a break and start up our monthly board meeting at 6 o'clock. Thanks.